I once heard the advice that manners maketh man. Do you know what that means? Well, in my review here of Kingsman, the Secret Service, and its subsequent sequel, Kingsman, the Golden Circle, I hope I can educate you. So, over the last 2 days, I've recently rewatched the Kingsman film and its sequel, Kingsman, the Golden Circle. I've actually yet to see The Kingsman, but seeing the films again, has sort of driven me to want to express my thoughts on, particularly the original film. But I also want to share some of my ideas regarding the sequel. I'm not too happy with the sequel. I think the first original film is a fantastic movie, probably one of the best movies of the 21st century. But the sequel, I think it loses a lot of what made the original so good. I mean, I'll just jump right into it. The first film, of course, is adapted from, or at least based on, the comic series The Secret Service, and is a love letter to James Bond. I mean, there's all sorts of James Bond references all throughout the film, and this foundation of knowing what James Bond, knowing what a spy thriller is all about, is what makes up the very premise of what Kingsman is all about, the film. And while I think the second film loses the plot in that regard, there's not as much of a James Bond foundation, and it's not tethered to that sort of historical film genre, and I think that's a big disbenefit, and I think it really harms the film. But the first film really is set in stone that this is James Bond. This is what if Bond was a poor guy from London, not this gentleman spy. But I think beyond that, there is a deeper sociological and political message to be derived from Kingsman: The Secret Service. I mean, on an entertainment level, it's fantastic. It's absolutely wonderful. On that sort of, this is a film to be watched, enjoyed. The action, the cinematography, the writing, the wit, the dry humor, very British dry humor. Which is also part of what I don't like so much about the sequel, is it doesn't have that British wit to it. It's very American, which I guess is to be expected if it's taking place in America as well. But yeah, but there's the action scenes, the famous scene in the church. But even like, just despite the limits in CGI technology, I mean, everything was believable. Everything had this very nice sheen to it. And I really dug the story, the speculative elements as well. I mean, the gadgets, the famous cigarette lighter grenade, the shoes. Do your best impression of a German aristocrat, which I'm not going to repeat here because I'd like to keep this YouTube channel. But those are all entertainment aspects that I think work very well, really tie the film together, make it enjoyable to watch. Because I think a lot of films, even if they have good messages, it's completely pointless if they're not enjoyable to watch. But Kingsman manages to remain enjoyable to watch. And it has a lot to say about our society and these political things going on in the world. I mean, and I think it's an implicitly right wing and conservative film, even though there may be sections that don't necessarily appear this way. Um, but right off the bat, I mean, the whole premise of the film, the idea that this um, poor, lower class, downtrodden boy from the the social housing of London rises up from beyond his means and becomes a gentleman spy against all odds. Uh, this idea, this premise is inherently, a very conservative, very right wing premise of a film. Um, and the way that the aristocrat in Galahad uh, and the poor man of Eggsy, the peasant and the aristocrat, unify against the bureaucrat, the Republican, the socialist. This is a very deep idea that is maybe not necessarily the most popular right wing idea nowadays, but has historically been the tether for, I mean, the United Kingdom, Germany prior to World War II, basically any monarchy in opposition to the French Republic. Um, the idea that it is the noblesse oblige, the obligation of the aristocracy to steward the poorer people is very much represented here in the film. The Harry Galahad has this noblesse oblige to the poor Eggsy, and he takes him in under his wing, teaches him how to be a gentleman, teaches him how to have this personal nobility, this dignity to fulfill his potential. I mean, there's the mirror scene, like what do you see? And I see a guy who wants to know what the fuck was going on, and Harry says, I see a man with potential. Because every man has potential. Every man has the capacity to rise above his means, if provided the opportunity and provided the inherent working ability, he can raise up through those ranks. I mean, in the modern day, we look at this idea sort of through the lens of capitalism, through the lens of, picking yourself up by your bootstraps or starting a business. But historically, I mean, we would think about this like joining the army, which, of course, Eggsy's father did. He joined the army and got picked up by Kingsman. But you would join the army, you would rise to those ranks, you would get, a medal from the king, pin it to your chest, and if you go all the way back to Rome and the Roman law, you'd get a villa, and your family would get a title and all these things. But, I mean, we have lost a lot of that in this sort of post-republic world, where it's no longer about the strength of character. It's not the strength of ruggedness and will. It's about what sort of opportunism you can take, what you can snatch. The Eminem song, which is maybe a bit of a weird comparison, but it is like the Eminem song. That is kind of the driving force of this Republican world. It's the opportunism, it's the conformist idea that, it's the consumerist idea that your opportunity is fiscally based. You have to reach and you have to snatch it. But I don't necessarily think that is the end. I think that's not what we should be striving for. I mean, I think to an extent it is true given certain circumstances, but I don't think that should be the end that we strive for. And I think that's what a lot of, capitalist and patriot and Republican people, and let me clarify, I mean Republican in the sense of wanting a republic, not in the sense of the American political party. But, I mean, in this case where it's about opportunism and about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and capitalism, that would also qualify the political party. But the film touches on this more historical aspect of uh, the idea that if you have nobility, you have potential, you have dignity, you can rise above your means and attain a next level on the ladder. And a lot of that has to do with loyalty, of which Eggsy is in no short supply. He's a very loyal man. Um, like, another example of something similar to this is Will Hunting in Good Will Hunting. He's loyal. He would die for his comrades, and he puts himself out there and he does everything for his boys, his lads, his fellows, and that is a very working class proletarian ideal, is loyalty to your friends, to your inner circle, to your brothers in the sticks, your brothers in the trenches. There we go. As to use some vernacular terminology, your boys in the trenches, your homies, having that loyalty. But in the idea of the film, and in this idea of upper class sensibilities and noblesse oblige, the obligation of the nobility, you extend that which you care about from your homeboys, from your fellows, to the nation overall, to all people who don't have the silver suppository, to take them under your wing, to steward them, and to care for them. And this is where we get the idea of government welfare, but rather than being administered by a bureaucrat, it's administered by your kin, by your family, even not necessarily blood related, but this family that you choose. If you have, a rich friend, they would, let you eat in their home. This goes back to even English Christmas traditions, wassailing, where you go to the rich man's house and you ask for figgy pudding. So give us some figgy pudding, right? That's what it that's related to this whole thing. Is you eat, you dine in their home, you are taken under the wing of the rich man. But when that richness is built from opportunism, when that wealth is grounded not in a tree of like a family tree, but when it's grounded in your own having to work and backstab and maneuver your way through the financial markets, when you have to do all of that, well, everyone is out for your back. Everybody wants your wealth, so you don't give it to anyone. You don't have the I guess charitous incentive, and except if there's tax breaks. But go back to 1500, 1400, 1000, when in this supposed era of feudalist, and these tyrants. Well, there was no tax incentive to give to the poor, but still, during every harvest feast, the peasants, who only worked like 100 days out of the year, would pour into the lord's feudal manor and would eat his food and would drink his drink, you know, just like how the poor Eggsy comes into the Kingsman tailor shop and comes out a better man. And this is the opposite message. This is the opposite message of what I mentioned earlier, Goodwill Hunting. This is pretty much the exact opposite idea that film says. That film says, well, rather than taking the opportunity and uh, going and doing it for the better of the whole, you do it for the better of yourself. It's a very American, very individualist take on this idea. But I personally prefer Kingsman's approach. This Kingsman's idea that if you provided this opportunity, you have this noblesse oblige, you have this loyalty to the nation, to the greater whole, to those below you, and this is something that I'll give credit where credit is due. They do kind of, to an extent, continue with this idea in the second film, but in a way I don't necessarily think is perfect. But nonetheless, I think the first film explores this greatly. It's you have this obligation to everyone, no matter their background, to the whole country, the whole nation, the whole world, the whole, not just your homeboys, not just the boys who grew up on the block with you, the whole. You have this obligation. And while the way that we see the whole being threatened in the film is very akin to something we see in the real world today. The Republican bureaucrats in the tech world exploiting and manipulating everyone, the elite and the poor. And a big way is with technology. I mean, the Industrial Revolution heavily changed the aristocratic lifestyle. Because, well, to some extent, there was no longer a give and take between the rich, between the aristocrat and the peasant, because there weren't a need for these peasants, these serfs living on hereditary land. Then they just had machines. They, a tenth of the people. And so the rich, the aristocrats, would just kind of hoard their wealth because they didn't need to redistribute it out. And the peasant went and he worked not for someone who he had familial ties to, or fellowship or kinship with, but with his boss. His boss in an office or in a factory or in a factory farm. There wasn't a rapport with someone who your father worked for his father, who worked for his father, who worked for his father, and on both ends of the spectrum. It was, yeah, I went and I got a job down at the factory, and my boss is this guy, and he's just all this big rich magnate, and I don't make bespoke, and there's the guilds and the historical method of production prior to the Industrial Revolution, which was all bespoke and was all cabin goods. I don't remember the exact name, but I think this idea of bespoke, made to fit, made to tailor, is pervasive amongst the traditional English identity, and is important for understanding, this relationship, is bespoke goods, bespoke and personalized, and personality versus factory and sterile and all that. You know what I'm saying? uh, because it's kind of, it's personal, it's familial versus it's industrial, it's impersonal, it's bureaucratic, it's made for one size fits all versus bespoke. But of course, one size doesn't fit all. The suit, like, do you think if I take this off the rack, it's gonna fit me perfectly? Technically, this one did. I got it at Value Village, but shh. um, but the technology works sort of parallel to the erosion of these societal norms. It happened in the Industrial Revolution when you stopped producing these cottage commodities and stopped having a personal relationship with your lord who you've worked for generations, and you started having these factory made goods, these production lines, and the you didn't knit, but you didn't sew, sorry, but you had a machine that did it for you. Then of course there's Ned Ludd, who, because of the sewing machines, he had a whole revolution, like in the Industrial Revolution, um, a revolution against the revolution. And so I think the point I'm making is, well, with the antagonist being Valentine, being this tech magnate, very similar to all of the other Silicon Valley magnates, well, that is another technology being imposed that is working contrary to the traditional historical society. And so we see this familial bond, this peasant boy whose father worked for the aristocrat, now coming and working again for the aristocrat, much like his father, and opposing this technology magnate who is working to undermine and to manipulate the people, because that's what he does, is he manipulates the people. He takes this wealth and he uses it, and he gets the free SIM cards. And I mean, theoretically, with the free SIM cards, I mean, if he wasn't planning on killing everyone with them, he could have done all sorts of things. But that shows the mindset of the bureaucrat, the mindset of the individualist, capitalist Republican, contrary to the aristocrat. Because those really are the two diametrical opposing factors in the world. And I think there's one scene in the film that illustrates this diametrical opposition best, and that is the scene with the Swedish princess and the prime minister. Because Sweden is a country that has stripped all of its power away from its nobility and given it exclusively to the elected government. And so Sweden has its prime minister, and the prime minister is the one with all the power in this situation. The king really is just a figurehead. And they say that about England, but England, theoretically, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the queen, or I guess the king now, sorry, the king has power, theoretically, though he does not use it. But in Sweden, literally, the king has no power. He is just a figurehead. And so we see the man with the power who is not bestowed unto him by heritage. He was not just given to him by nature of his father being the prime minister. No, or no, no, no. Because supposedly they say if it's just given to you, oh, you don't care about it. It was just given to you. Why are you? Why would you care? Well, we have this man who owes everything, everything he owes. Is only relevant just because the people thought he would be a good representative. He was elected by the plebeians, by the peasant, is where he sources his power. He says he is a Republican. He believes in a republic. Well, why then does he use the power bestowed unto him by the people to kill the people? Well, I think if we look in many situations, past and present, we see that this is a trend. The people who derive their power from the people use that power to kill the people, or at least to disenfranchise them and weaken them. I mean, look at the United States government with the Patriot Act, all of those wars for oil, uh, the United Kingdom, where the Prime Minister, I mean, even though the United Kingdom has a monarchy with power, of course, like I mentioned, in practice, the king doesn't exercise much power. Well, we have all of these bills in past where they spy on and they watch and they I'm going to find a specific example and I'll flash it on the screen here, where the Parliament will vote to have this bill where the surveillance state can do whatever they want, and it's the House of Lords, the people who derive their power not from election but from heritage. Those are the ones who care about the people, because they don't need to care about what is popular. They don't need to care about voting cycles or maintaining their elections, because their power isn't at risk. Their power is implicit. Their power was bestowed upon them by nature of them having this heritage. So they're not thinking 4 years from now, how am I going to maintain my power in the next 4 years? They're thinking, how can I use my power now to help the most amount of people for as long as possible? It's the old saying, civilization is when old men plant trees under which they shall not experience the shade. And so when your power is derived from your heritage, you're not thinking about your next electoral cycle in however many months, your popularity polls. You're not thinking about how you can change that, manipulate that, how you can make the people think what you want to think. You're thinking about, how can I make the people have that tree with the shade that I will not see, that I will not experience? How can I maintain the patrimony of the country so that 6 or 7 generations from now, the people are still experiencing the same benefits and the same benevolence and the same there's a word that I cannot think of right now. Plenty, whatever. The same good civilization that I have now. How can I maintain the status quo in this good civilization? How do I do that? And that's what they're concerned of. That's what they're concerned with, is the well-being of the civilization overall, the well-being of the nation, not the well-being of their polls, not whether they are going to be elected in 4 months. And I think that is kind of what differentiates them. And even in a situation where the princess has no power in the country of Sweden, she's still thinking about, how do I maintain this shade? How do I plant this tree so that the many people of Sweden will continue to have shade when I am long gone? But the prime minister says, if I don't do this now, if I don't kill the poor people, I will be irrelevant. I will be voted out of power and I will be gone. And nobody will care who I was. Nobody will care. My future, my future, will mean nothing. And that is the diametrical sort of difference. That's the implicit difference in mindset. And I mean, this isn't 100% the scenario, though. Because we saw, with the Industrial Revolution and with the impersonality imposed between the nobility and the common man, we did see a bit of a betrayal of these historical practices. And we see this represented even in the film Kingsman. Because after the Industrial Revolution, the aristocrat were made basically null. I mean, besides the House of Lords, that class of society was no longer implicitly tethered to the common man. And so, with the Reform Bill as well, the Reform Bill making it so that the House of Lords had significantly less power, now we saw that the aristocrat became the bureaucrat. We see this in Germany and we see this in England, and this is what leads to the First World War. This betrayal of the aristocratic class in becoming the bureaucrat. And it's not all of them. We do still see noblesse oblige, particularly from the king and the royal family. But now we get the snob aristocrat, the snob posh rich boy who goes to a private school. And that's who we're at the Kingsman training, I think his name was Charlie, who becomes the antagonist in the second film, which, but that was a betrayal of their duty, of their noblesse oblige, which I keep reiterating, but it's true. It's a betrayal of their noblesse oblige, and this is what leads to World War I. World War I, where we send thousands, countless boys to their deaths. And even still, in this conflict, the First World War, there's a phrase that was repeated, that British officers don't duck. Now, at that time, officers weren't just anyone. Officers had to have gone to officer school, which was basically exclusive to the nobility. So why then do British officers not duck? Well, British officers don't duck because they have a noblesse oblige to inspire and to set an example for their enlisted boys. They have that loyalty to the men in their unit, but to the war overall. And that it shows that they have this inherent quality of nobility and of loyalty to the greater whole over their own personal safety. And in the aftermath of World War One, as said by the film, we saw the creation of Kingsman. So that betrayal of the aristocracy, and amongst the aristocracy in supporting the war, led to the creation of Kingsman as an opposing force to ensure something like World War One, to ensure the needless death and the needless killing of innocent boys, innocent men, would never happen again. That's what they say. That's what they say is the point of the Kingsmen. The Kingsmen don't duck, so the officers don't have to. But even then, this pervasive element of republicanism works like a snake, and it slithers its way into the Kingsman agency, and it gets Arthur. And Arthur joins the plan, which is just another World War One, which is just another forever war in the Middle East, which the Republican United States maintained, leading to needless death of poor boys and needless death of Middle Eastern civilians. And Valentine, just like the many companies in the United States supported the war in the Middle East, Valentine supports this death, and it manipulates what is righteous and what is good, and manipulates them into causing the thing that is directly contrary to their whole purpose in the first place. The whole purpose of Kingsman was to prevent a betrayal amongst the aristocrats and to prevent another World War I. But yet, they want to kill all of these poor people, and they led to the genocide of an entire human race. Basically. But the motivations have changed. The ideology is not about war between nations, which, honestly, war between nations up until World War II was pretty much an unideological affair. But in this case, the war against the human race was ideological and came from these the climatologist and the climate scene of Valentine. Valentine, of course, being concerned with the world climate and therefore thinking of humanity not as, God's people and this very valuable, inherently, intrinsically valuable entity that one should sacrifice themselves to protect overall, but instead as a parasite, as a virus, as something that ought to be culled. And this mindset of treating humanity like animals, like any kind of how do you say? This mindset of treating Earth as this thing that is greater than humanity. To an extent, conservation is good. Conservation is important. I think conservation is very important. I think that climate is a significant thing that's going on in our world. But they've been called watermelons before, where they grab this very real problem, and they take it and they say that we can work with this. We can spin this into something contrary, something opposed to righteousness. And they take it and they say, well, it's your fault that the world is burning. It's your fault. You are doing this, not my technology company, not my cell phone business, Foxconn, not any of that. No, 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 no. You and your plastic straws, that's what's destroying the environment. Well, obviously, obviously, the individual man is not the one releasing all of these emissions. So, how then do you deal with climate? Well, certainly the answer isn't killing every single human being who's not a Republican elite, who's not Barack Obama, as shown by the film. Um, uh, and I don't really, in this review, I don't have a clear answer for climate change. I mean, I think later on in my video catalog, I might try to address climate change. But I do think that decorporatizing and going back to this made for wear, bespoke, personalized world where the nature of of relations or kinship between peoples is a good start, and that's something that I think the film also touches on. I mean, with Kingsman Taylor's being bespoke, with the aristocrats and the poor, working together, as they historically have, against the production line and the industrial technology peoples and the watermelons of the climate exploitation and manipulation, culling. And so, really, at the end of the day, I guess the takeaway is the film is very good. The film is implicitly traditionalist, implicitly right wing, with the whole premise. And that's when we get into the sequel. The sequel kind of unravels a lot of this. Eggsy does away with his dignity. He stops dressing nice for some reason. He starts hanging out with and you shouldn't abandon your kin, but you should elevate them with you, which is what Harry tries to do, Galahad tries to do. He elevates Eggsy, and Eggsy elevates his mother. That's what he says at the end of the film. He says that his job comes with a house, and he elevates his mother. But then in the second film, he goes back and he starts hanging out in the old house and doing these drugs, and not doing drugs, but drinking on a work night. He doesn't elevate his friends, and his mother's not even a part of that whole equation for whatever reason. And so, I mean, that kind of undoes a lot of the important work and important messaging in regards to Eggsy's character. And then there's the whole thing with the statesman. Although I do really like the line that Southerners get their good manners from the British, because manners maketh the man. And I was really hoping to touch more on manners maketh the man, but this video is almost an hour long. It's 43 minutes long thus far. And so, I guess with the intro it's even longer, 45 probably. And so, I don't think I'm going to get into that at this moment. I might make a follow-up video where I discuss the meaning in my mind of manners maketh man, and why, even though we maintain a fire in our heart, a propensity for defense and violence, where we can sit around all day, or are we going to fight? we should never cuss out. We should never be overly needlessly violent. Um, but like I said, that's a topic for another day. I think I'm gonna wrap up this review here, and I think I'm just gonna review. I'm gonna summarize all my thoughts. I've been rambling quite a bit, but I think I'm gonna make a quick summary of my thoughts in another recording. So it'll just be a cut here. So, in summary, my perspective on Kingsman: The Secret Service is that it represents an implicitly right-wing film where we see the collation of working class sensibilities with aristocratic nobility into a young man who is able to extend his loyalty just from his circle of friends to all of society and civilization. Of course, civilization being when an old man is able to plant a tree under which he shall not feel the shade, and that the bureaucrat, manipulated by the technocrat, tries to overrule and to betray the aristocrat, who in turn has the possibility to betray themselves and betray the people to which they have the obligation. And we see that with Arthur, we see that with Valentine taking the Republican Prime Minister and locking up the aristocrat who does believe in the noblesse oblige, locking it up and suppressing them so that they cannot make use of their inherent inherited authority to protect those that they have a born duty to defend, rather than an elected responsibility on paper. And I think we see all of this reflected in the real world beyond the film. And I think that it's very beautiful with the outcome of course, Eggsy and Merlin and Roxy all coming together to best the Republican techno magnate, and to reinstill those traditional values and that traditional noblesse oblige. And I think that really summarizes my review. I mean, of my ideological review. Of course, the film on its own is wonderful, absolutely fantastic, cinematically and entertainment wise, and it has some of that messy, good, get in there sort of action that I very much love. I mean, it reminded me of Nobody with the fighting scenes, Nobody itself also being a wonderful film. So, I very much appreciate anybody who took the time to watch this. I hope you have a good one.